I like the background you got going on over there.
Thanks.
All
Yeah,
the
I figured that with my whole theme and where we met, be a good background, which
it's
is
quite
basically my living
appropriate.
room.
Quite
Thank you.
appropriate. Well, we'll jump right in. Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on to another episode of the Food Origins Podcast. Today, my guest is Shelly Meyer. She is the chef on her show Shelly's Game Kitchen on Carbon TV and Roku. She also is the founder of Montana Flavor Seasoning and Spices. She's a private chef. She's also a former restaurateur, and she brings 3 decades of experience to us. So I appreciate you coming on. And shout out to the Forlo event here in the Flathead Valley. That's how we met. And also Chef Thomas Fitzgerald from Region Sauvage. So appreciate you coming on, Shelly. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Yes. We met at the Forlo event with Chef Thomas, and when you asked me, I'm like, absolutely, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke with I know Thomas is going to come on at some point too. He's a little bit more reserved and kind of quiet. You were very outspoken in just everything you were doing. So I just told you straight out. I was like, I love your energy. You obviously have a huge passion for cooking in general, and then of course people and stuff. So you know, that's pretty much what I ask people all the time about and what people want to hear, but also you have a specialty in wild game cooking. So of course, I've had a few hunters on or a few ranchers on, and like I had Danny Bolton on, and he's out of Hawaii, and all he does is fish, hunt, you know, travel to go hunt. So it's really cool to see the full circle because a lot of people see the hunt, but then they don't see what gets made after. And there's a very select few amount of people that can handle that. So I'm really excited to that. And the first question I always ask is, what's your background? Where'd you grow up? And what is your earliest taste memory, meaning what you ate growing up? The Food Origins podcast is sponsored by Firecracker Farm out of Florida. It's Alex Buttermart and his family grow hot peppers and infuse them into sea salt. You guys have seen me cook with it on social media quite a bit. And the podcast is now sponsored by firecracker.farm. I have a promo code Food Origins Pod C. You get 10% off your first order. Make sure you check it out. Come in these awesome push grinders. And also, you'll see my latest flavor that I inspired Alex to make, yuzu. It's an awesome buddy batch. Use it on pretty much everything. You can use it on eggs, steak, chicken, vegetables, coffee, spirits. Um, awesome way to wake up with a little scoop of honey and some hot salt on there. A lot of fun ways. I have a bunch of recipes that I've written for Firecracker Farm on the website, so check that out. There's a good 18 recipes or so. Plus, 10% of the proceeds go to Op 300 and Pipe Hitter Foundation. So make sure you check them out. Appreciate the support. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode.
So I was actually born in Kansas, but my family moved up to Montana when I was 5 years old. So I have always basically considered myself a Montanan. And so truly, my first taste experience that I remember is my grandmother's home baked bread. You walk into the house and the aromas of fresh home baked bread are distinct and unforgettable. And then taking that slice and having that fresh cream butter on there. That's basically my first food eating memory. Um, and then she also was a huge forager, so she taught me about how to go out and forage for wild greens, like wild mustard greens and wild asparagus growing in on the side roads in Montana. And then we'd go back and she'd show me how to cook it up. And I grew up with that farm style. My dad was first a farmer and then he became a contractor building homes, and then he moved into building roads. But starting with that farm background, we always had farm fresh eggs, and I guess I truly remember. I don't remember the taste of it, but he would go out and milk the cow and come in with the bucket and put that on the table, and that was the way we started. But when my grandmother would teach me how to cook, there was always the bacon grease canister, that the little tin, you always reserve the bacon grease. So everything that we cooked was really animal fat based. And it was cheap. It was reserved. We didn't grow up rich with being able to afford to go out to dinner. My parents, there was five of us, and plus my grandmother lived with us, so that was six. Um, but it really was, I think, special. My mom was a okay cook. Um, she was more of a baker, and like, I remember making homemade biscuits, and that was kind of a morning staple. We had fresh made homemade biscuits. So that's really the way I was raised, with just down home farm cooking, and using those, animal fat based, but with fresh foraged greens, and we had a garden as well. So my mom was a big canner. So we snapped our beans and canned our beans and stuff like that. So it was really, I didn't experience cuisine until I met my husband and actually moved out of Montana and toured a little bit of the country, and then really got excited about the different flavors and the different cuisines.
When you say getting out, like, what was maybe something one of the first things you're like, "Oh, I need to start traveling more," or "I didn't know this existed." Was there something that, like, opened everything up for you?
You know, I always explain this because I grew up on wild game. My dad hunted and he would cook it. Um, but he had the mentality of you have to completely decimate it because it didn't have all of the shots and wasn't farmer touched and so forth. So when I met my husband, he literally came over to my apartment, brought venison steaks, a bottle of wine, cracked open the bottle, poured me a glass, and told me to go sit down while he cooked venison steaks to medium rare. And that was the first time that I went, wow. Because the first time he's like, I'm going to cook you, some venison. I'm like, yay. Not going to like it because it's just jerky.
Yeah.
So, but I was a trooper and said, okay, sure. But literally cooked them to medium rare. And it was an eye opening moment for me because growing up in a small town, Montana, um, and the other aspect is the seafood here. We're landlocked, so you don't get fresh seafood in Montana. But it was that wild game, and then also experiencing sauces and things that were completely different. The Cajun and the Creole dishes. My mom was a meat and potatoes. We had pot roast, which I love a great pot roast. The potatoes and the carrots that soak up all of that jus in there.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, but that was the extent. Burgers, pot roast, chili. Uh, we made enchiladas. These were kind of staples, and there wasn't anything elevated. There was no, and even when we go out to a restaurant, I mentioned the seafood. There was one restaurant, it's no longer there, but when I was growing up, they had on the kids menu 21 popcorn shrimp. And they were just literally the little breaded little cocktail shrimps. And I would get that every time because it was the only time I ever got shrimp. Um, and so leaving Montana and getting out and traveling, and I met my husband in North Dakota. That's where he's from and was raised. I moved there for work. Um, and then through him was able to travel to coastal areas and actually have fresh seafood and fresh lobster. Experiencing these sort of things completely different than the way I grew up, and it really got me more excited about trying new things. Like, I have the mentality that I'm not afraid to try anything once. If I don't care for it, then maybe it's the way it was prepared, and I'll try it a second time prepared in a different way, or I prepare it the way I think it should be done before I ever judge it as, "Okay, I don't like that." But that's one of my pet peeves with people is they say they don't like something, but they've never even tried it once. And that happens a lot of times with wild game. It has that people think because somebody else has said, oh, it's gamey or whatnot. Not if it's prepared correctly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the people are so afraid of it. Even my hunter friends, because a lot of my the couple friends, only one of them is a hunter, and so the spouse doesn't know how to cook it, and they're afraid because all of the things that they hear. Uh, so that's kind of what spurred me into my progression, if you will, of my career is to really help people get creative. Like, when I got with my husband, literally, he was grilling a steak, and that's the way he would cook wild game, and I'm like, "Can't we have something a little bit more unique? It doesn't have to be grilled steaks and potatoes. Let's do, you know, different things." Like, one of my favorite meals that and now is his favorite meal, and it used to go in the grind pile, is my, red wine braised elk shanks, and I've done it in antelope shanks as well, but that unctuous, um, meat that just becomes so, delicate and flavorful after you do a slow braise. These are they're not necessarily difficult, but they're just unique ways of doing something instead of just putting it into a grind because that's easy. There's so much meat that just goes into burger in the wild game world because they don't want to worry or try and do something unique.
For sure. I mean, your approach, approach, it's in the word, but your motto is always simple and approachable. Try to make everything easy. And you're right. Like I'm now in Montana, but I was in the city, big city for a while in Northern California. It's like you hear elk or deer or venison, and they're like, "Oh, it's in chili," and it's like, okay, I can kind of taste it. Doesn't really go anywhere. And then I got into archery, and then I met Andy Molko. I don't know if you've met Andy. He's out of Bozeman. He does the venison flip flop, and
Yes.
it's the hind quarter. And then I got the fortunate, thanks to Hans at West Coast Archery, he had blacktail and axis from Hawaii, and I got to try both on the flip flop. And I was like, oh my god, like the axis is like ahi. It's like seared
Yeah.
ahi.
It is so good, so tender, and it's a sweet, rich meat.
Mhm. Yeah, and so, like, you're getting it right off the grill, sliced right off, it's rare underneath, you have a little bit of seasoning and marinade on top, and just yeah, it's yeah, so when you like you said, when you get it prepared a certain way or prepared correctly, maybe is the right way to say, you can really, really enjoy it and then go, "Oh, now I can if you can make that, what else can I make?" So there's a lot of stuff you've made. I mean, you've got flavors and dishes that are all over the place. Are there a certain flavors or dishes that define home for you all the time?
I'm a comfort food, but I love a really deep sauce, like um, the Bordelaise sauce or the red wine reduction sauce, but I love balance between the seasoning to the acidic to the unctuous savory part. So when you hit and I mentioned that before, the red wine braised shanks, that sauce and gravy to me, that's home for sure. And it likens back to when I grew up with, gravy out of the package. And now
Yeah.
I have learned through my entire career and so forth, I never get those packages. Because I know it's so much better when and I literally, we save our elk bones, and I'll make elk stock. I've made pheasant stock. I've made all kinds of things and then reduce them down into a really reduced jelly because
Mm.
that's your thickener. Um, and I all of the things inside those bones, the collagen that creates that sauce, it's I don't say nothing goes to waste, but I really try and appreciate the whole aspect of the animal and the experience. You know, I was not raised as a hunter because the woman's place was in the home, and I kinda rebelled against that. Um, and so really when I met my husband is when he's like, "Well, yeah, let's go out. Let's go pheasant hunting. Let's go duck hunting." And then we got into deer hunting, and last year, this last season was my first elk that I was, able to harvest. I got
Oh,
a cow.
awesome.
Yeah,
Congrats.
thank you. And I've been trying for 3 years, but, you know, it's not called harvesting, it's called hunting, so,
Mhm. Yeah,
but to to harvest something that you appreciate everything from it, from the heart and the liver, as well as the main primals, and also the stock and stuff that you can create from it, and have it be something that you were able to provide for your family, it's next level for me as far as the passion goes. I've always been passionate, like, not always, as an adult. As a kid, I was not passionate because I was forced to cook for the family. So like I said earlier, I kind of rebelled against all of that. And it wasn't until
mm,
later, truly, when I met my husband, that I developed that passion. And then, kind of he actually says I surpassed him, um, because he can't do a lot of these sauces. He doesn't know, and he's not interested. As opposed to me, I'm interested to know all of those little aspects.
yeah. Is there that's, like, right into my next question. Montana has a lot of hunting culture. Is there a wild game ingredient that people misunderstand, you think?
You know, I think wild game as a whole can be very misunderstood. I when I like on my cooking show, I focus on wild game. Now I love domestic proteins. I love a great ribeye and so forth, but comparing beef to the wild game world, wild game is so much leaner, so much healthier, um, because it doesn't have any of those hormones, but it's also, those muscles have been used more than a cow sitting in a field. So understanding that each cut needs the right amount of time, but also most of them, because they're so lean, they don't have the fat to really carry heavy spices or heavy sauces. So, and that's when you were alluding to earlier when you had the Axis chili, you really couldn't taste the blacktail or the Axis because it was in a heavy spiced sauce. And so if people have said, "Okay, yeah, I've tried it," but they haven't tried it in a primal steak or a backstrap or a tenderloin or even a top, shoulder, because that would be like a sirloin, um, ball tip or whatnot. If they haven't actually tried it with just minimal seasoning and maybe a sauce on the side and not heavy, spicy spice, they really haven't tasted the meat. And I think the biggest thing for me is in the harvest. That's where people go wrong in the wild game world. Because if you've had wild game that tastes a little gamey, um, or it's tough or it's chewy, this is because they're not understanding the purity of the harvest is so important and how you treat it after you harvest it, how you clean it out, dress it out, and so forth. And then understanding that's, like an old bull elk, um, they're not gonna be as tender as a young bull or a cow because their life is more about utilizing those muscles and they're older. Same thing in the beef world. You know, older bulls don't have, you know, typically the tender steak. So you can't judge all elk meat or all axis meat based on an old animal, or one that was really in the rut, or all of these things, whether it's a dry cow, a wet cow, and the difference on that for people who don't know, the dry cow is not nursing, a wet cow is nursing, so there's more fat in the wet cow. Um, all of these things change the way the meat texture and flavor are. So if you're not like when we butcher all of our own animals and we package it, we do our own grinding of our burger, and we'll list it on there. Like, okay, this is Shelly's cow elk, or my husband's Brad. It's Brad's bull,
Right.
and then say burger and the year, obviously, 25 or 24 or whatever. But then it's also in the freezer. You know, freezer burn is a thing, and if you don't know how to properly wrap that, like we wrap like 10 layers of plastic wrap super tight, get all of the air out. Then we wrap it super tight in freezer paper. So we have 2 to 3 year old proteins in there that don't have freezer burn. Um, so all of these things matter. And if it's a somebody that doesn't know how to cleanly harvest and cleanly shoot, um, it's gonna affect that protein. It's gonna infect the end harvest.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Biggest mistake cooking wild game? I'm sure
Overcooking
that's
it.
yeah.
People it's that medium rare is the sweet spot on wild game. If you get much more, if you get past medium, that's where you're gonna get that tastes gamey or it's chewy. It's so lean, it cannot handle that unless you're doing a low and slow braise for those tougher the shanks and stuff like that. That's the only way because it's completely submerged in a flavorful liquid that you can cook to well done. But on your steaks or whatnot, when they overcook it, you're changing the entire texture and the flavor, and you're accentuating everything that could possibly be bad in the flavor of that protein.
Are you pulling it at, temp wise to help some people out because some people can't do it by feel? Are you pulling it at like 125 and letting it rest or
So,
somewhere around there?
yeah, depending on the size, like if it's a super thin tenderloin, or, you know, like an antelope tenderloin is maybe this big around.
Yeah.
So that one, I just go, it's a timing. It's 2 minutes on this side. I flip it. It's 2 minutes on that side.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll, if it doesn't feel like it's totally done or I have an instant read thermometer, I am a 125 to 130, pull it off the heat, let it rest for 5 minutes or so before you slice it. But that again depends on the size of that protein. If it's a larger steak, um, then I'll use a leave-in thermometer or a larger roast, I should say. I'll do a leave-in thermometer and I'll pull it at 130, um, and let it rest because on a roast, I'm gonna thin slice it to make, you know, roll-ups or, um, spring rolls or something. So it my sweet spot to me is actually that in between 125 to 130, and I but I like mine on the rare side of medium rare. But then it becomes a texture thing. So to me, it's kind of a personal texture aspect. But yeah, 130 is the max of where I go before I pull it to rest it. Because by the time it rests and comes up, it's going to come up anywhere from 3 to 5 degrees. and sometimes more than that, depending on that size of that protein. And you have to let it rest to relax those muscles.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it can sneak up on you real quick. Like, I mean, I've overcooked a steak before and I'm just like, I let it go because I'm trying to get the crust on the outside and you got all the seasonings and letting everything going. And then you're like, hey man, that thing's getting tight. I better, gotta pull it. Yeah. I mean, and that's mostly, and you're referring to mostly like the tenderloins and the leaner steak cuts. Obviously the braising cuts are totally different.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun question for you. There's, obviously a lot of recipes out there from Montana and the frontier out in the plains and stuff. But are there any recipes that deserve a comeback? Do you think like an old recipe that should be coming back?
There's so many of them that actually they've refreshed and updated with certain things, but, you know, really a good old-fashioned bordelaise or hunter sauce with the mushrooms, um, I don't think, you would have that as a steak die-in. I think that there's a way that that could be elevated, like, with wild mushrooms and wild game and really develop that sauce with maybe some, uh, elk stock or something like that. These are things that you don't really see very often anymore, in on a menu, unless it's kind of an old steakhouse diner aspect. I think
Yeah.
that deserves a definite comeback with an elevated twist.
Okay. Cool. I kind of want to get into your show. Obviously, it's probably one of the main things you're doing, which is Shelly's Game Kitchen on Carbon TV. What's been, there's a lot of like ingredients you've cooked with as far as wild game. Like I've got the whole most of the list here, and I'm sure I'll miss a few. But axis, antelope, elk, oryx, pheasant, tundra swan, grouse, bison, boar, nilgai, rabbit, and turkey. Quite the list, which is awesome. Is there something that surprised you when you started cooking with a bunch of these different wild game? Is there one that you're like, "Oh, wow, I didn't expect that"?
Oh, great question. Um, I think really not being from Texas, the wild boar really surprised me because it was so clean and it was sweet and clean and beautiful, tender. And, I had, Chris Hughes, who owns Broken Arrow Ranch up, and he helped sponsor my season that year, and he brought these things, for me to try, and that the wild boar ribs, if I remember right, I think I did a huckleberry glazed espresso rubbed huckleberry glazed wild boar rib, um, and then I made this carrot salad in the style of a potato salad because espresso and carrots are molecularly aligned on a gastronomy level. Um, but it was honestly, that's one of the ones that surprised me at how clean it was because you can't get domestic pork to taste that good. And it's so hard on the market now. And I'm sure you have researched that or have had somebody on that's talked about the whole pork market and to me, to have something that truly tastes so clean, and Chris said, "This is the way pork was supposed to taste like the original before all of the commercial stuff got involved. That's the way pork should taste." And it was unlike any domestic pork I've ever had. So I was surprised because I've been to Texas, I've visited Texas, so I know the area that they are growing up in.
Yeah.
Um, that the flavor of that was truly one of the tops that surprised me. The rest, you know, red meat to me is pretty similar, but a lot of people like elk is my number 1. I love that. Antelope is my number 2. And a lot of people that shocks them. But the nilgai was even more tender than our North American antelope that I'm used to, so that was super fun, and I did nilgai, I did, the liver as well, and I made a pâté with it, and I did it in the sous vide because one of the secrets on liver, even domestic, but definitely on wild game, is you don't wanna overcook it, so that's the beautiful thing with sous vide is that you can bring it
Uh-huh.
up and keep it at that steady temperature and then process it. So I made it, did it 2 ways. I made a pâté with it to use, for a crostini, and I think it was an apple compote I put on that one. That was a while ago. Um, and then I used that pâté and made with nilgai backstrap, made a Wellington. And that was actually my most watched episode of all of my 4 seasons that I have out because it was unique. I used multiple aspects of the animal with the liver plus the actual backstrap and in a, puff pastry type of scenario. So it was a lot of fun and we've done it before as a family. Like for Christmas one year, we did a huge elk backstrap and did it in a Wellington type of scenario with puff pastry and um but this one was just kind of like a smaller cut and this is almost like a two-person meal. That was awesome. But truly, and I think this camera crew is from New York, and they've never had the majority of any of this wild game that I've cooked on the show. And that was one that they really had a hard time trying was the liver. But like Chris and myself and the other people in the room were oohing and eyeing over the flavor that I had developed with it, and they had to try it and were wonderfully surprised. So that was, yeah, some I've done so many things that are so fun and different ways to show how to do it that don't limit you, that are slightly elevated, but not overly complicated. And that's kind of what I want to be known for is bringing wild game and taking the fear out of it. I want people to no longer be afraid. And I categorize my game. Like, for instance, red meat category includes your elk, your venison, your axis, and then it also includes migratory birds like duck. Um, these are because they're migratory, you cook them to a medium rare. You don't decimate them. And I so many people want to put wild duck and goose and stuff like that into the poultry category rather than understanding that they're migratory, so therefore and the other thing I did the, ribeye of the sky, and a lot of people don't realize that that is actually the sandhill crane. That was so amazing, and there was fat in there was marbling in it. That was one of the surprising things. Marbling to where it truly did look and taste a little bit more like a beef ribeye, not as fatty as a beef ribeye, but it was super delicious. Oh my gosh. Yeah, now I'm getting
That's
hungry.
yeah. Well, I tell everyone if you're listening to this podcast, you better have eaten already.
Yeah, truth.
It always comes out that way. Um, I've gotta ask you, with all the filming, cooking, we're gonna get into some of your catering too. Obviously, you catered some celebs, which is fun too. But has there been some kind of, with filming and stuff, has there been some kind of organized chaos moment or some funny story that's happened on the show or before the camera goes off or before the camera goes on, I should say, and you're just like, we got here just in the nick of time kind of thing?
Yeah. You know, the funniest aspect that I have is when the New York studio reached out to me and asked me to come to New York and film a pilot. So I get there and there's 3 different kitchens, but the one that they want me to cook in is not properly stocked. And so if you go back and watched my very first pilot episode, and I believe it was, I think that's when I did the espresso rubbed antelope tenderloins. Um, but I can't remember. I'll have to look at it again. But I they didn't have, like, regular kitchen tongs. They had hot dog tongs. So,
Oh,
I am trying to toss a salad with hot dog tongs. I'm trying to do everything because the other studios were full and they were filming.
mm,
And so I couldn't, like, cut and say, "Go get me a set of real tongs." And then the other aspect was I was doing a, cauliflower and parsnip puree, and they didn't have a steamer basket and lid. So we had to use tinfoil. And these are it just brought me back to, like, my restaurant days of, you know what? You find a solution. You just make it work. You make it
yeah.
happen. There's always something that you can do. Um, and I had a wonderful I can't remember his name, but I had a wonderful prep, cook that helped me and did the dicing and measuring and stuff off screen. And, he's the one that said, "Just roll with it and make it like you're in the restaurant," and, like, you're right. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's on TV. It can literally be like you're at home or you're out in the woods and you don't have everything and you can't drive to the grocery store, 5 minutes away. So you make do with what you have. So it was really funny, and I laugh about it every time I see a nod to that episode airing because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, the hot dog tongs instead of, you know, the clamshell tongs that every chef owns and uses." Um, and then I think outside of that, it was literally being able to get the wow from the camera crew that they were never gonna try this, and then they do. And I've done some flambés and the camera's right there, and I'll tell them this is gonna flambe, and the camera's right there, and they're like, "Oh, wait, I didn't realize you meant flambe." That's kind of what it
Yeah,
means. There's so many aspects that go into, um, the filming and the editing of it. Those are things that I never planned on learning, but through necessity have actually learned. The first 2 seasons, I, had a crew, that from New York. The first season was filmed in New York. The second season, they came out to my home here in Derby, and we filmed the second season here. And then the 3rd season, they wanted me to go back to New York, and so that's when I decided that doesn't promote my mission with what I wanna do with the show and my purpose, so I, um, nicely severed ties with that network, and that's when I went on to Carbon. Through that, season 3, I hired a local, cameraman to help me, and then season 4, we went on the road. My husband and I, we traveled to all these different locations, and that's the one that's airing now, so I'm doing all kinds of different stuff, in different locations and cook with some of my friends that are notable in the industry, like Jenna Waller. She does Skullbound Chronicles and Skullbound TV. Um, and then the president of Carbon TV at the time, who has since moved on to other adventures, but being able to go into their home and cook something for them that they've never done before, and they're hunters, and they eat wild game all the time. So to get them to go, "Wow, oh," yeah, those are the fun things that really don't get televised.
yeah. No, and that's why I wanted you to talk about it because, like, you go behind the scenes and see how things get put together, or the wrong thing shows up, or and of course, a lot of us have watched Iron Chef on Food Network or something, or they get a certain amount of they're already told like this is all you got, but there are other times where you're trying to create what's in your heart in front of them, and you have to take it from your home or your kitchen and bring it totally somewhere else, and that's a difficult task. So to see it, just to hear a little bit about it, and that people need to understand it. And also, just to go back a little bit, is you owned a restaurant for how long? 10 years. You owned a
10 years.
steakhouse, right? What was
Yeah.
that like? And, what do you think of the industry right now?
You know, I loved everything about the restaurant business. I thrive in chaos, I guess. Um, I thrive on deadlines. Um, but it was 10 years of 80 to 90 hours a week. And that's what, even though we only opened for dinner, like when the first couple of years we tried to do lunch and dinner, but it was just too hard in the whole staffing aspect. And it just was in not an area that people could walk to from work to go to lunch. They had to drive to us. So it didn't really make sense. But we would open at 4 o'clock for dinner. Um, but I had been there from 9 a.m. making the desserts from scratch, making the dessert sauces, making the bread because we ground our own burger. Like we would bring in primal loins of ribeye, New York, and tenderloins, and then we would trim them all out. And the good trim you would use and make grind. So our burgers were literally ribeye, New York, and tenderloin. So and sometimes brisket when because we would do briskets, smoked brisket specials and stuff. So they were very elevated ground meat. Wasn't it
Yeah.
wasn't chuck and it was lean but flavorful from all of that trim. So much of behind the scenes that would happen from 9 a.m. until 4, and people don't realize it. Um, and I would have customers come in and, "Man, I wish I had your hours." I'm like, "Yeah." They don't understand how
They
much
don't.
passion it takes to be willing to do that extra level because when we first opened, my husband ran the kitchen and I ran the business in the front of the house. And we came from catering, like we'd been catering for large um, events in the Arabian horse world, which that's sometimes where I started cooking for celebrities and NFL players and so forth was through that in the catering aspect. And we would cater up to 1,500 people. So, and one time I did a whole plated steak dinner off of a propane grill, portable propane grill out of a barn and my husband was out of town, so he couldn't help me. I literally plated that whole thing. I had some serving staff that they hired to carry out the plates, but I cooked everything, and it was elevated. We did burgundy mushroom caps and stuff like that. So it wasn't just a grilled steak and a side veg. It was elevated plated. Um, and to do that by myself, I think kind of proved to myself that you know, if I can do this, I can do darn near anything.
Yeah.
Um, but to take that into the aspect of the restaurant, and Brad ran the kitchen and was the main head chef, he got really tired of it after 2 years because, again, it takes everything. And when you're a spouse team working in a restaurant, overworking your hours and stuff, it takes a lot out of you. So after 2 years, he went back into the industry that we left, when we bought the restaurant, and I took over. But the first 2 years, we were simplified. Like, we bought ready-made frozen french fries. We bought, ready-made, cheesecakes and cake. After he left and I took over, that's when I decided, I'm like, "You know what? If I'm gonna do this, I have to do it to my level of passion and what I want." And so that's when I started doing everything from scratch. I mean, I didn't make the saltine crackers. Those still came with the soup in the little package, but outside of
Yeah.
that, I was making everything, and the team that I had that in the kitchen, we would prep everything and make everything. We made all of our own dressings from scratch, our vinaigrettes and our creamies. I made all of the desserts, and then most of the sauces we did a la minute. So, but prepping all of the little ingredients that you had to have prior to that, the minced shallots, the minced garlic. These are all things that have to happen before we even open the door for one customer. So, and then on top of that, I ran the front, and the biggest struggle I had in this area, and I know I'm friends with Brandon and Christina
Mhm.
Dearden, who have Ember and Grano in Hamilton now.
Yep.
The biggest struggle is we're in a small town, a small valley, and there's no college here. It's 45 minutes away. So we don't have a turnover of repeat employee pool to pull from. And restaurant business is very cyclical. I mean, people don't decide that they're going to be a waitress and that's going to be a career. They decide that they're going to have a summer job and waitress. So the constant turnover and constant training. I was either in the back of the house filling in on the line, or I was in the front of the house filling in as bartender or hostess or serving. I did absolutely every single position in that restaurant, and it was a regular nonstop cycle of turnover, and that's really where the burnout comes from. Because after 10 years of 80, 90 hours a week, and I was losing 2 people out of the kitchen and 1 person out of the front was gonna go on a month-long, vacation in June. So, like, all of these things added pressure to, like, I am one human being, and I'm already at 80, 90 hours a week, and trust me, my husband's like, "It's literally killing you. Your health is
Yeah.
being affected." So, it was the toughest decision I ever made because I loved every aspect about the restaurant business. I love the creativity, but it was also when I finally did close it and we sold the building, we sold the equipment, um, it was former customers that reached out to me and said, "Would you be interested in private chefing for us and personal chefing?" And I said, I let's give it a try because I was missing the creative aspects. I love the creative aspects of food. And so I cooked for them for 2 years. And I would go in and personal chef twice a week. I would do a live service, but I would also prepare 2 other meals for them to finish off. Like I would maybe make an enchilada or a chili or something like that, plus one more thing that just needed a little finishing, um, that they could do when I wasn't there. So they for 2 years, when they were here, which was, 4 months out of the year, um, they would eat my food every single day except one. They would go out to a restaurant, one day. So it really that's when I became passionate more than anything. Um, and that's actually after the restaurant, after catering, and after 1 year of personal chefing is when I decided to put myself through culinary school, more because I
Right.
wanted my own confidence, because that's what it gave me, and I did an online, certified course. I got approved to go to the college, and I was gonna do that, but they wanted me to redo all of my vaccinations. Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So I found a course, and this was the year before COVID, and now since COVID, every school has an online culinary course.
Yeah.
And all it really gave me, because I'd already been cooking, from high school on, I've been in the industry in some form or fashion, in and out of it, and then the catering aspects. I'd already been doing a lot of it, but the school just gave me a foundation and the confidence, and honestly, what I got from it the most was ratios. And I love sauces, and I wanted to be able to, no matter what somebody has in their kitchen, I can go into that fridge or into that pantry, and I can put together a sauce and a meal based on understanding how to develop flavors with ratios. Because, like, for instance, Polenta, you don't need to read the instruction. If you It's a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 parts liquid to 1 part polenta, and that gives you the perfect consistency. If you wanna be able to slice it and have a disc, you do 3-to-1. If you want it more runny, you do 5-to-1. If you're thickening a sauce, you need, like 2 tablespoons of roux to cup of liquid. These type of ratios. Um, and same thing whether you're doing a velouté or a bechamel, it's a stock versus a cream. These are the foundations that I don't need a recipe to make something that can be elevated, and easy to add something that's a wow factor in a sauce.
Yeah, so just kinda cleaned up some of the stuff that you were working on already. Yeah. In the private chefing world, you are in Derby. We have to do mention that you are in the home of the Yellowstone show, which is the Dutton Ranch in quotes there, but it's actually a different ranch. What's that like? Did you cater any of the parts of the at that ranch and anywhere else? Some fun stuff?
So, the ranch is called Chief Joseph Ranch, and
Mhm.
it's just a
Right.
mile south of my home, and when they're not filming, they operate as a guest ranch. And so people can rent the cabin, Rip's cabin, Beth and Rip's cabin. They can rent that. The main lodge is actually the owner's home, and they live there. I have cooked in that kitchen for the owners,
Okay.
and they're wonderful people. But yeah, you can hire me, and actually used to be able to because I'm really backing out of that because I've gotten so busy. But I've been very blessed to cook for a lot of wonderful people. The cast, like the main cast of the main Yellowstone, I I had talks with some of them to do a private chef dinner with them. Um, but for instance, one of them gave me called at like 7 o'clock the night before and wanted me to do a dinner for 14 people the next day. I'm like,
Yeah.
if there was anything that I could have tried to pull out of the hat, I would have, but I don't have my own restaurant. And that's what people don't understand
Yeah.
when you private chef, how long it takes, first of all, to come up with the menu and then do the prepping. I still do all of the desserts from scratch. Um, and then the grocery shopping. I mean, I
Mhm.
literally shop for every ingredient.
Yep.
So no, I can't do that because I also need my sleep. And then the other one, the main character, she's so sweet in real life. And she was I was planning and I had the whole menu set and then she contacted me and said she had to cancel last minute. So unfortunately, I didn't get to cook for those 2 main characters, but I did get to cook for, Eric Nelson and his family, his wife Sainty and their whole family. Eric played Innes on 1883, which was a prequel, and he was super sweet, and the whole family's super sweet, just down home people, and I cooked for them several times. They stayed actually up there at the ranch, and so I cooked there. The problem and the insider secret that people don't realize is I as a chef, you have so much counter space and prep space, right? You in a restaurant, you plan on these. That little cabin is literally like a cabin. I have when I'm cooking there, it has a farm sink, and then it has 3 feet on the other side of the farm sink, which is pretty much where they keep all of their drinks and stuff like that. Then there is a corner next to the stove. So in that corner is really only like 2 feet by 1 feet that I have to prep and everything. So it's
Yeah.
so small and it's all electric stove. So I've learned over the years because I've been doing it for so long when I put the menus together, how to stage it and how to say, okay, we're going to do something that's going to be on the cooktop plus in the oven. So you're not trying to do 10 things on top of a cooktop like you would in a restaurant because you only have 4 burners and they're electric and they don't have the same heat uh, consistency as gas does. So they do have a grill, but it's all the way out in the back, and typically it's not clean and prepped. Uh,
Yeah.
so it came down to just the secrets and going back into prep, mise en place. These are huge things when you're going in private chefing for anybody. And I've cooked. He didn't stay there, but I've cooked for Josh Duhamel several times, and again, wonderful guy. All of his friends as well. They're just I've been very blessed in my career to cook for some really amazing and wonderful people, including my very first client was, they called him the godfather of Silicon Valley. So he actually was he's passed away now, but he was a financier for like Google and
Mm,
Apple and all of these startups. And he would tell stories which were so funny of he literally went to go give Steve Jobs money, and Steve's in his garage in flip-flops and holy jeans and you know,
yeah.
just to hear their kind of stories too, was super fun. And um, Eric Nelson, who played Ennis, a lot of fun stories on the back end and behind the scenes. So I got to learn
Yeah.
a lot of stuff like that.
For sure. Do you get a top request, so what to make, or is it kinda all over the place?
Usually, so I submit menus for them to choose from. And 9 times out of 10, it is gonna be a beef forward, um, or steak forward. I do, like, my vegetable purees instead of potatoes, and that's always been a wow because people, they think that they're potatoes, but they're actually, vegetable puree, root vegetable. Um, that gets requested a lot. My very famous white chocolate cheesecake with huckleberry coulis is a top dessert choice, and my salads. I private chef for a couple that I've been private chefing for 5.5 years. I was supposed to cook for him, for, like, 6 months, and they won't let me go now. And that's they're not, the husband, Mike, is not a big salad person unless it's mine. And I love to take the meal in a progression. Like, we start with the salad and that opens up your palate, and then we go into the main course and it complements each other. And the same thing with the dessert. We've got something that is naturally progressed into palate pleasing full on meal.
Yeah, and that's a nice nod to you when someone eats something that they don't normally eat on a daily basis, and then it's your dish, and they're like, "Well, she makes it, I'll eat it." That's awesome. Yeah. Well, we got to before we close this out, we got to talk about Montana flavor, which is what you were on the road like a while like just a week ago. So tell us about how that got started and what you're doing with it. Obviously, we can get into some of the seasonings and what you like to cook with them, but yeah, tell us how all that came about.
It Thank you. It really came about because of the restaurant. And before the restaurant, like, my husband had been trying to find a seasoning for turkey. And that, one of those things, turkey is one of those meats that are kind of hard to flavor and make taste really good. And he was trying to develop this, and he created something that was so good on even meat and especially wild game. But when we would cater even back in the, before the restaurant days, we would cater for international dignitaries from Brazil or Argentina, which are very beef forward countries, and they would say, "This is the best steak I've ever had in my life." And so it really came down to not only the preparation of it, but also the seasoning. And so that's we decided, okay, let's the way I got him to move back to my hometown in Montana was, let's buy a restaurant and open that up and start it with the steak seasoning. And so we put it on everything red meat, the brisket, prime rib, uh, burgers, steaks, what have you. and customers were asking us if they could take it, buy just the seasoning for their home use. And so that really became the spur of the idea that one day we should package this, we should be offering it for sale. And so many restaurant nowadays do that. They have their packaged goods that they sell. Um, we didn't, that wasn't really a huge thing when we had our restaurant. But that was kind of the spur. And then when I closed the restaurant and I transitioned into private chefing, I created the rest of the line because I was cooking for people with dietary restrictions,
Yeah.
heart problems, other health problems. They were on medications. And some of these additives that are in spices counteract adversely with medications or people with dietary restrictions. And I couldn't find any on the market that tasted good that weren't heavy sugar or had all of these anti-caking and
Yeah, the
I
anti-caking
mean, I
agents.
could go
Yeah.
on and on about my I'm very passionate about the purity. And I think it comes from being a chef. It's like if I want to add something, I want to be able to eat it individually and then when you mix it together, they should blend well. But if I'm not going to eat silicon dioxide on its own, why is it in my spice? And there's people out there like, well, it's anti-caking. If you buy cinnamon, it doesn't have it in there.
Yeah.
If you buy black pepper, it doesn't have it in there. That's the large manufacturers that have just taught consumers, oh, because anti-caking makes sense, but it's just a cheap filler. And the free flowing, all of that, it you don't need free flowing in black pepper. It's got fines and chunks in a black pepper grind. So I get very passionate about it. And a lot of it is because I know flavor and I've developed all of these based on what I want. And then I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And I'm like, you know what? Why is there sugar in here? We don't need it. So then I revamped them and completely removed sugar out of 5. They're the 5 base ones, the seasoned salt, the steak, the fish, the herb, and I have a salt-free and sugar-free, which is unheard of because if they take out the salt, they add sugar, and mine is salt and sugar-free. Again, for people that have dietary restrictions. Um, and then I've got 2 that have a little bit of spice, and then I'm using a little bit of pure cane sugar. But the dextrose and sucrose and all of these toast sugars that are in spices, they're not good for the body. They are manufactured. They are completely adulterated. And so if you're going to have something that's in there, a little bit is fine, but it should be pure. So I use pure cane sugar, organic, non-GMO, all of those. Uh, but it's nominal just to balance the heat, the spice. Again, talking about chef balancing between the acid and the sweet and the umami and salty and uh, balancing that in a blend that makes it quick and easy to get chef flavors without having to have 10 separate ingredients because people they're hungry for delicious food, but they don't have the time to develop or read a recipe. And so sometimes it's just nice to grab a shaker that's already blended and made for the chicken or already blended and made for the wild game or the beef. Um, and that's kind of what the line is about. I'm going to go into we're adding in some more on the barbecue line, but I'm going to again keep it pretty low sugar. It's not going to be something that's just sugar because sugar is an immediate palate pleaser.
Yeah.
So if you taste something and they're like, "Oh, that's delicious," how much sugar's in there? If it's overly laden, of course you think it's delicious. We love
Yeah.
sugar.
Yeah. I know. It's like if broccoli tastes like chocolate, we'd eat more broccoli.
Right,
But
and this whole
you're
craze with
right,
the
because, like, that's the constant battle, like, you've been going through, and I've interviewed a lot of people, and then even myself. for myself nutritional journey and talking to different human performance guys. I've had Brandon on, Brandon Dearden at Ember. You're just talking about getting real ingredients, like going to the store and looking at the bread and the tortillas, and you're just like, it's n- it has I can't read half the stuff that's in there, and then you wonder why it can sit on the shelf for God knows how long, and how long it's been there, how long it was made before it got to the shelf, and just trying to find, like, I just wanted to have corn, some masa, water, and salt in the
Exactly.
tortilla, and maybe some, lime or something, and that's about it. There's like 6, 7 under ingredients, and then you wonder, like, why you don't feel so good down the
Right.
road.
Well, and the food supply is so messed up. I mean, if you go back
Yeah.
to our grandparents' era, they didn't have they had canned goods that they probably had canned themselves in
Mhm.
that brine,
Yeah.
but they didn't have shelf stable, breads and corns and I it the tortillas are absolutely amazing to me that they don't need to be refrigerated and they're just sitting out, but they never mold. And something that does not get the problems to me, what is that doing inside your body?
Yeah.
Like, I literally did this whole wild carnivore with ferments, and I did it for 3 months, and I reversed my type 2 diabetes, thank you,
Awesome.
because I wanted off that medication, and the lessons learned of all of the gut biome and everything, that is what's wrong with so much of the nation is it starts with the food. Um, the being able to have something that's quick and easy, like the fast food or even, bread, it has completely decimated our health in the country. And that Europe does not allow so many of those ingredients. Um, and there's some starting now. There's some distributors, and I'm being courted by one. So hopefully Montana Flavor will be coming to a store near you.
Sounds
I'm in
good.
40 stores across the state of Montana, but I'm wanting to grow outside of Montana, which is that trade show I was just at in Nevada. And it proved that the brand does carry beyond Montana. And it's more about the purity. Montana, we're known for being, you know, the clean skies. So the name actually came from, my son and I, our son and I, whose name is Hunter. Hunter and I really kind of developed the whole brand, and I want to make it something that I can pass down to Hunter and future grandchildren one day as a legacy that I can be proud of. Because I don't want to put something in my body that I don't want, and I certainly don't want to create a product that I offer to consumers that I don't like, because it's got some sort of a ingredient in there that I won't take. So I stand behind everything that I've made, in a way that I know it's pure. So I'm very fastidious on that and passionate about it.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I've had a few, brands that have done quite well, including Bachan's Japanese barbecue sauce. I had Justin Gill on. That's a family recipe that, he was like, it took 6 years to get that out to market. People think, "Oh, he's an overnight success and just sold the company for $400 million," but, like, that took years and years of just making sure it was the right way. It was his grandma's recipe. I mean, still is his grandma's recipe, and just keeping it, how to get it to CPG and cold pressing it and making sure all the ingredients are correct and all the different things, and then I've had Nico and Lauren, a senior Lechuga hot sauce. If you have their hot sauce, there is not a single preservative in their whole every bottle is super clean, He's a fit guy, she's great, she's into the, great marketing, great, just everything they're doing. Just know that yeah, they just wanted a clean product, And so to see that passion you have for that, it's awesome. And yeah, I can't wait to try some of them. You do have an espresso rub too, right?
Yeah,
Tell us
yeah.
about that.
So the espresso rub is kind of that real fun chefy thing. And a lot of people don't realize that coffee is awesome on a grilled steak, but also it's awesome on salmon. Like I do an espresso rub salmon and do that with like maybe a huckleberry sauce or espresso rub New York steak with a blue cheese fondue. Fun things that just kind of elevate it. And you definitely, there's a lot of coffee rubs on the market, but a lot of them are just bitter forward. Like when you taste it, you're crunching a coffee chunk like Folgers. Like, I
Yeah.
use a espresso grind dark coffee, and it's from here in Montana. So but it has, like, 13 other ingredients in there to balance it, because coffee can be bitter forward. You need to know how to balance that with just, the right amount of sweetness, the right amount of heat. So it has about mild spice. It's earthy. You definitely get coffee on the nose, but when you cook with it, it just becomes caramelized and earthy and gorgeous. And a lot of my fans are doing it in ribs, like they're smoking ribs with it.
I was gonna
Uh,
ask if they're using
yeah,
it throwing in the smoker. Yeah. Okay.
yep, yeah, and it's truly one of those fun things um, that elevates without overpowering it. Like, you can still taste the protein, but you're getting that, "Huh, there's something interesting there." So, it's super fun.
Awesome. And we'll put all the goodies in the show notes and everything where we can find it and
Thank you.
all that stuff. Some fun questions before I let you go. Thank you, Shelly, for being here. Um, Something I like to ask, especially chefs, especially, do you have a favorite tool in the kitchen that makes your day easy? Is there something that you're just like, man, this is cool. Like it just makes my day.
I think the one that I probably would go to that, not every kitchen has is my immersion blender. I love my immersion blender. Like, I how you can slowly emulsify a vinaigrette with it, or, because there's not a lot of starch in a, root vegetable puree, I can use my immersion blender, to really get a nice, fine, beautiful puree. I love my immersion blender. Um,
Who makes
I
it?
love
You
my
know?
mandolin.
Do you know who makes the blender? A lot of
It's an
people get
all-clad.
okay,
Yeah, I
perfect.
use an all-clad one because, what I love about it is you can disconnect the blade part from the motor part and be able to wash the
Clean
blade.
it.
Some of them, like the non-professional ones, they're all one unit, and it's really hard to you can't disconnect it, but, get a bowl of soapy water and then, hit
Yeah.
the blend mode and wash it that way. But yeah, I use All-Clad, and I use All-Clad, 5-ply stainless pans at home. Um, I just had this conversation with somebody, and what they asked me about the stainless pans, and so many people don't realize, and this was one of those little insider things that culinary school taught me, so I won't take credit for it, but a stainless steel pan, when people have problems with it sticking, is because they haven't allowed it to come up to a hot enough temperature before adding the fat. So if you add you put your pan on the fire and then add the oil in it right away and let that all heat up together, your protein's gonna stick. There's something in the molecules of that metal that, when it heats up, uh, you need to wait for that moment, and then you add your oil or your fat, your ghee or your duck fat, whatever, and then let it melt, and then it becomes nonstick. So I like the 5-ply because it has 1 layer of copper in the middle. If you're not a professional chef, you don't need the 7-ply because those are ridiculously expensive, and 2 layers of copper is just not necessary unless you're doing a ton of really professional work. But I definitely say the 5 ply over the 3 ply because you have at least 1 layer of copper in there, which gives you a consistent, heat. Um, and then my cast iron I have my grandmother's cast iron Dutch oven and my grandmother's cast iron skillets. So yeah. Those
Yeah.
are my I know I gave you 5 or 6, but
No,
those are
that's okay, because a lot of times that's the question that gets asked, and getting down to very specific things too, because sometimes it's a legacy piece or it's a wok you've had forever, or a chef's knife you've had forever, or you picked it up along the way and you're like, man, this thing makes my life easier. You did talk about the mandolin. That was the other thing. That's
yeah.
that's another one that's
I use a bin Reiner, which is uh, you see it pretty common on the Food Network on all of those shows. It's just a easy one, but obviously a tool that you need to be careful with.
yeah.
Uh, and we have friends that have used others and sliced off their tip of their fingers and but to me, if I'm trying to get that super thin or perfectly uniform slices, I love a mandolin. Just use the guard and they have gloves, but I don't have them. I just use the guard. Um, and then if you have want to use more, I just put the remainder of the vegetable into a stock bin or something like that. But yeah.
Yep, perfect. On that note, I'll leave you the floor. Thanks, Shelly, for being here. Any promotions you got coming up? This episode will be out pretty quickly. And so, yeah, anything you want to promote, any advice you want to give to the home cook or the pro cook, let us know. Floor is
Well,
yours.
thank you. This has been so fun, Dave. I'm so excited and happy to have been here with you, and it's been a fun conversation. Some of the things I have going on is season 4 of my show is
Hmm.
Shelly's Game Kitchen is airing now. I'm gonna start I'm no longer exclusive on Carbon TV, so I'm actually gonna start putting them up on YouTube and looking at other networks to kind of broaden out the reach. Um, season 5 is gonna be really fun, and I'm already planning it. Um, and I'm gonna be doing some really unique things as far as the proteins go. But more than anything, my husband and I built an outdoor kitchen. And so I'm going to be showcasing everything in season 5 on my outdoor kitchen. So, pretty excited about it. And I did next level, chef stages and equipment and stuff like that are really super fun. I've got an Evo grill, which is a industrial cast iron grill. People are familiar with Blackstones, but the Evo is round, um, but it's super thick. So you have more consistent heat. So that's going to be fun doing a lot of things on there, talking about those tortillas. Let's make some homemade masa tortillas on the Evo and do some dishes that way. I'm gonna do I've already got, rattlesnake. I'm gonna do
Mm,
something with that.
okay.
I've got,
I've
mountain
actually
lion.
had rattlesnake, actually.
Yeah. Well, and so I like to these are things that I have never had. So a lot of
Yeah.
this season's gonna be things that I've had them, but I haven't cooked them. So and I always do at least 1 or 2 prior before I film it. So my husband can taste it, I can taste it, and I can tweak the recipe before I get really proud of it. Um, but so I've got rattlesnake, I've got mountain lion, I've got some alligator, I've got my husband just got a wild boar, so I'm going to be doing some more wild boar. Um, what else do I have? I got some kangaroo. So
Okay.
I know it's kind of interesting, different things that I look at it and I go, in different cultures, these things are normal.
Hmm.
So let's learn from other cultures and let's learn to, spread our palate into different areas and you know, hopefully I like them. If I don't like them, I probably say, Yeah, I don't know that I'll do that one again.
Yeah. But I mean, definitely adding to the list of wild game for sure, like,
Yeah.
spreading it
Well,
out a
and
little
that's,
little more.
you can only do elk in so many different ways,
Yeah.
and I can show venison and elk in different ways, but to be able to show something, and there's so many other shows out there that are doing that,
Mhm.
but to show something done that maybe is not average or everyday, but a unique item, um, that's what I'm gonna focus. Season 5 is just gonna be a little bit fun, on
Yeah.
top of being outside on my outdoor kitchen.
Perfect. Super interesting. I'm excited to see the kitchen too. Always
Thanks.
excited to see what people how people set their stage up. So that'll be fun. Cool. Thank you. We'll close it out there. Thanks everybody for listening. And we are out of here. You can find Shelly at Chef Shelly Meyer on Instagram. Also, all her seasonings and rubs and soon to be other things at Montana Flavor on Instagram. And then you can find her show on Carbon TV Media and coming soon to YouTube and wherever else it's going.
Yeah,
Appreciate it,
and
everybody.
the Montana dot flavor. The Instagram and Facebook is Montana dot flavor. But yes,
There you
thank
go.
you. Thank you so much.
Perfect.